Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you deep into the night here on a Wednesday evening in late May, and a more upbeat podcast this evening. We are part of the Foul Territory Network, and you will hear more about AG1, by the way, later on from Foul Territory's Scott Braun and Eric Kratz. My usual colleague and co-host, Scott Coleman, is still gallivanting around the continent of Europe right now. I take you behind the scenes a little bit here. I had another plan that kind of fell through this evening, so in short, you are stuck with me on this Wednesday night for a kind of a mini pod of sorts, a little bit shorter than usual probably on this podcast, but plenty to discuss, and I could not skip this evening because there is a lot to get to. So, the Braves had lost 5 of the last 6 games entering Wednesday night, including a pretty brutal 10-inning defeat on Tuesday. You should definitely catch up and listen to our previous episodes on this podcast network, by the way, in addition to subscribing to the show anywhere you might find podcasts. Apple, Spotify, etc. That includes sort of a rant session from last night on Tuesday from Stephen Tolbert and Sean Coleman. Before that, I had a minor league check-in with my guy Garrett Spain of Battery Power on Sunday. And then earlier over the weekend, we had a visit from ESPN's Buster Olney. That was really a lot of fun, a lot of great insight from that conversation. But again, the Braves are struggling right now. We kind of all acknowledge that. We all know that. But Wednesday's game ended up being a 9-2 victory for the Braves. A pretty badly needed bounce back for all parties involved. That sets up a chance to win the series in Chicago over the Cubs on Thursday if the Braves can win on Thursday afternoon. We'll get to the offense because that's obviously very important. It's been probably the biggest focus around the team in recent days. All the struggles there, and for good reason, to be sure. But we have to start with Max Fried on this Wednesday night. Fried was brilliant on this evening, throwing his second complete game of the season, and he really just was tremendous across the board. He was perfect through 5 innings. And we started to have a little bit some of those aggressive visions of what could be necessarily if he were to keep it going. He did allow a leadoff hit in the 6th inning to kind of remove some of the tantalization on that. It wasn't quite as close as the Braves being 1 out away from a combined no-hitter earlier this month. But once he settled back in, it was smooth sailing from there. Obviously, a complete game, all 9 innings. He had 9 strikeouts, 0 walks, 3 hits, 2 runs. Only one of those runs was earned. There was probably some debate on whether he would actually come back for the 9th inning. He had 94 pitches through 8 innings, and they probably would have taken him out if there was any kind of trouble in the 9th inning, but there wasn't any trouble because he was really good in this game. He finished with 105 pitches on the night. He got 15 whiffs. Like, he was just brilliant from the outset. There were a little bit of a hiccup along the way, but like basically you couldn't ask for much more from Max Fried in this game. He looked like his actual peak self for the majority of the evening. It's been a little bit hit and miss for Max this season, but more hit than miss lately, to be sure. He now has 5 starts this year, which has basically been dominant to the point where he finished with at least 6 innings of work while allowing 1 earned run or fewer in 5 different starts. That also includes 4 of his last 6 outings. So basically, he's been really, really good lately. There have been some ugly outings, of course. The first 2 starts of the season were really rough for Max, and then he was not his best at all on Friday against San Diego, which he failed to make it out of the 5th inning. But all the way across the board here since the slow start, he's been really, really tremendous. Overall this year, Max now has a 3.38 ERA for the season. His FIP is in line with that as well. His numbers, as far as strikeouts are concerned, are down a little bit from previous years, but he's basically been normal since he arrived to the season, essentially 2 starts late after that kind of rough start. You can't just remove those starts from his full season line because that's a little bit of cherry picking and arbitration. But if you did that, his ERA is around 2 since those first 2 starts in about 50 plus innings. So Max Fried has been Max Fried in capital letters for a little while now, and it's much needed. Obviously, the Braves have gotten incredible contributions from Reynaldo Lopez and Chris Sale. Charlie Morton has been rock solid so far. The 5th spot that we'll get back into a little bit later on in this podcast has been a little bit uncertain this year, but without Strider, having Fried as the ace, and he still is the ace. I know Chris Sale has probably been pitching like an ace this year, along with Lopez as well, but Max Fried is still the guy on this rotation. He's looked like Max Fried in a lot of different ways. And look, I've said this before. In fact, Scott and I on our old podcast talked about this over the winter about how Max Fried, if you look at the numbers, has basically been a top 10, 12 pitcher in baseball for the last 4+ seasons. Since 2020, basically. He has been that kind of guy, ERA-wise. Peripherals have been really strong, all that stuff. And again, right now, he looks like that pitcher again. So you want to get carried away, but he was absolutely tremendous to the point where we're leading with him on this podcast, despite the fact that the Braves woke up from their extended slumber offensively in this spot. And we'll get to that in a second, I promise you. But first, a word from our guys at Foul Territory on the folks at AG1. And here is Scott Braun and Eric Kratz.
Kratz here from FT. I wasn't feeling as focused as I wanted to be and heard some buzz about AG1. Since drinking AG1 daily, I've felt energized, locked in, and ready to hit the day.
Braun here. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a better, smarter way to elevate your baseline health. Kratz, not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. That's a big deal for me.
I recommend AG1 to fam and friends because it's tested for 950 contaminants and NSF certified for sport.
Kratz, we're both traveling a lot too, and those travel packs are clutch. I drink AG1 daily to support gut health so that we can dominate the day. So if there's one product to recommend to elevate your health, it's AG1, and that's why we're excited to welcome them as a new partner to the FT Network. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/Val. That's drinkag1.com/Val. Go check it out.
All right, and we move to the offense now on this kind of mini podcast on a Wednesday evening. And of course, we all know this. I won't give all the numbers again, but the Braves have only scored more than 5 runs once in almost 4 weeks. It has been really, really rough for the offense. We all kind of understand that. I'm sure if you listen to this podcast, you were aware of those numbers. They did that again tonight. Again, the second time in about 4 weeks. The Braves have not scored 9 runs in a game until tonight since April 14th. That is almost 6 weeks since this actually happened for the Braves in one game. I gave a lot of stats on Sunday night when I last recorded on this podcast feed, talked about how grim the numbers were from like April 27th until that point, especially when you compared that to the team's batted ball data. That's kind of put it to the side for now. The offense has been a little bit better than the underlying numbers recently. But of course, then the real issue the last couple of games before today was that the Braves went a combined 4 of 29 with runners in scoring position in the 2 losses in the last 3 games. Steven and Sean talked about this extensively on the show Tuesday, which is worth listening to again. The Braves went 0-14, over 14 with runners in scoring position on Tuesday. And it's worth emphasizing, again, it was the most at-bats without a hit with runners in scoring position for the team since May 12th of 1999. I was in 7th grade. That tells you how old I am. It also tells you how long it's been since the Braves went that many plate appearances / at-bats without a hit in runner scoring position in a single game. So tonight, they were only 2 of 7 in that position. But they didn't actually need to be any better than that this time because the way they group things together, and that's been the opposite of what's been the case so far this year. The Braves have been objectively unlucky, I would say, with how they've pulled their plate appearances and pulled their production together this year. And I will not do the entire debate on that right now. There's always a debate about unluckiness and batted ball data and production and all that stuff and approach, etc. Save it for later, but I think it's been pretty clear they've been a little bit unlucky, at least a little bit so far this year. And tonight, they opened the game with 6 up and 6 down, and that feeling of here we go again was kind of creeping in a little bit on offense, given the way things have gone in recent days. But then Adam Duvall homered in the 3rd inning, and the Braves never trailed from that point forward. Now, it was still pretty close until the 7th, and they finally had a big, crooked number kind of inning that they badly needed, and that happened in the 7th inning. So the first 2 runs were generated without kind of bludgeoning the baseball. It was a walk, a hit by pitch, a sac fly, and then a really nice squeeze bunt from Zach Short. It's actually going to be kind of forgotten now because it was more of a lopsided game. That was a fun play. I usually don't like bunts, but squeezes are better to me than sacrifices are. And it's also reasonable with a guy like Zach Short at the plate versus one of your better hitters, more powerful guys. So plus it worked, and there you go. But then the real boppers came to the plate. Marcell Ozuna hit a 3-run home run, and then Matt Olson hit one right after him. Those 2 also went back-to-back on Monday, so a little bit of power from that spot. Always nice to see. Ozuna has been unbelievable. We kind of know that, but it's worth just emphasizing again. 15 home runs. That leads the National League in home runs this season. He also now has a 15-game hitting streak active right now. He has been the one guy all year long on offense that's just been unequivocally good. In addition to leading the National League in home runs, Ozuna is 2nd in the National League in slugging percentage and WRC+, trailing only some guy named Shohei Ohtani, who happens to be an alien. So basically, Ozuna has been the best human hitter in all of baseball, or at least in the National League this year. Olson was, of course, brutal on Tuesday, along with most of the roster, and he had a rough start to the season. But he's been notably better in recent days, by the way. Matt Olson is now 12 of his last 36. That's 333, of course, with 3 home runs in like a 9-game sample size. So it's a small sample size in that direction, but given Matt Olson's history, it's probably safe to say he's more this guy than the guy he was in the month previous to that. So some signs there of him breaking out. And then the Braves did add another run in the 8th inning, thanks to an error and a wild pitch, but most of the damage was done in that 7th inning. And again, I don't want to overstate it. It doesn't mean that everything is fixed. They got to do it again on Thursday for anybody to be satisfied with what's going on. But the Braves are at least showing some signs offensively, and they had already been before tonight. It's just that they were not sequencing very well. And tonight, the sequence a little bit better, at least in that 1 inning where it actually mattered. That's kind of it for the game itself. It was kind of a breezy win. Obviously, the fact that Free was so good gave you another talking point in addition to the offense. But it was a ho-hum win, and there haven't been a ton of those in recent days. So it's almost like the Braves have had a lot of rocking chair wins in the last few seasons. Not a ton of those recently, so nice to have that one on the ledger on Wednesday. There's a little bit of news before we get out of here. Sean Murphy had the day off tonight in Gwinnett after he caught the game on Tuesday in Gwinnett. They're planning to DH him on Thursday. He could be back as soon as maybe this weekend. I don't want to say that on the record, but it's one of those things where he could be back pretty soon. He had a home run on Tuesday, looks the part, and obviously that'd be a huge, huge influx of talent when he can arrive. Austin Riley hit off the tee on Wednesday for the first time since his comeback bid began. Obviously, he has been out for 10 days now, and the Braves are playing a man down. It's very wild. But if there was ever a team to do it, it's this one with how they handle their guys and play everybody basically every day. They don't have a ton of depth. So I think in a vacuum, you would have obviously gone to the IL if you had known it was going to be 10 plus days, but they didn't know that at the time. And Riley's getting slowly back. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. What matters there is that Austin Riley is back and 100% when he's back, which is hopefully in the next week or so. So there you go. A quick peek ahead to Thursday, which is the series finale in Chicago. And the Braves have just announced, as I'm recording this podcast, that it's going to be A.J. Smith-Shawver on the mound on Thursday. That is not a huge surprise because they optioned Bryce Elder this week. AJ is someone I talked about a lot on the podcast on Sunday with Garrett Spain. He, of course, made it to the majors last year briefly, and he has been around, but he's still very young and he's very talented. I know Garrett likes him a lot. I think I like what I've seen a lot as well. The Braves had to basically fill 2 spots in the rotation once they elected to option Elder. So Thursday and Friday were always going to be someone else from the minor league system, but it looks like it's going to be AJ on Thursday. TBD still as far as what they do on Friday, but again, given the way they sequence this stuff, unless there's an injury that we don't know about, Elder won't be able to come back, and they'll have to pitch somebody else from the minors on Friday. Could be Darius Vines, could be all kinds of names out there. It's obviously matters who pitched to Gwinnett this week, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I'll let Sean and Steve break that stuff down a little bit on Thursday evening, but we know this now, Thursday afternoon, AJ Smith-Shawver is going to be on the mound, according to Brian Snicker, and his first start of the season in the majors, and a lot of attention paid to that one. Again, it is a 2:20 first pitch Eastern time on Thursday. So I'm sure some of you are listening to this podcast after the game has already started or has happened. That's the nature of an early afternoon game during the week, so my apologies there. But keep an eye on that one, 2:20 start, and we'll have a full breakdown later on this week from Sean and Steven. That's at least the plan, and then I'll have another show, usually, at least I'm aiming for our usual time slot on Sunday evening, despite it being Memorial Day weekend. So as I sign off here, please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you might find your podcasts. I know this is a little bit of a shorter episode with just me, but most of the time, the vast majority of the time, you will have 2 hosts or more on this podcast, or at least a host and a guest. But shouts to Sean Coleman, Stephen Tolbert, my usual guy, Scott Coleman as well. We're having fun on this podcast for you. We had great response from everybody that's been joining us, that's come over from Battery Power, or if you're just finding us for the first time. We definitely appreciate all of that. So one more time, Apple, Spotify, Overcast, ratings and reviews appreciated. And the best thing you can do besides subscribing and downloading, clicking the podcast, is to go ahead and subscribe, but also to share the podcast with your friends or your family or a combination of both, maybe even your enemies or coworkers or whatever. People that like the Braves, share it on Facebook, share it on Instagram, share it on Twitter, etc. We'd be very appreciative of that as we sort of aim to grow the podcast and find some new listeners. So shouts to the guys from Foul Territory. Check those guys out as well. We have a new show on the network. It's actually called Northside Territory that covers the Chicago Cubs. Recently launched Dodgers Territory. It's a burgeoning network that we are happy to be a part of. So thanks for listening, everybody. We really do appreciate it, and we'll see you all next time.